Okay. That's how I feel too. That's how I feel too. My wife is out of town all week. All right, we are on page 44. Go from the base on base. We're on the third line down. Masnisa. It says here Masnisa. It really should be Masnisa. Masnisa command Amar Avodah Zarah Knidam Sham She'al Knidam. We had a bright on Amud Aleph, which said that Avodah Zarah is like Nida, and the things which serve the Avodah Zarah are also like Nida. The implements of the Avodah Zarah. Accessories, maybe is the best word. Ninon, and now we have another bright which says Eitzav Va'avonav Va'tzvaro, which we assume to be the accessories of the Avodah Zarah and its accessories. The time of Kesheret and the time of Kesheret, not like Nida. Now, be that all as it may, that's not really relevant to the conversation we're about to have. Conversation about to have discusses how do the Eitzim and Avonim become Asur? How do you make Eitzim and Avonim Asur? It sounds like they use their building materials. So how did the building materials become Asur? What were they part of that became Avodah Zarah? So now this Gemara, the identical Gemara, or parallel Gemara I should say, it's more exactly, is Gemara Masechta Shabbos, Yerushalmi and Shabbos, Daf Nun Ches. And I looked up the Yerushalmi and Shabbos, how we learned it then. And we learned it then like the Korban Eidah there, and the Yerushalmi who changes the Girsa. And we could learn like the Korban Eidah tonight, but instead I decided that we're going to learn my way, because, no shock there, I know. But by this time the Yerushalmi, I think, this is really gaiva. But I think at this time the Yerushalmi had the capacity to learn with less changes of girsa than time to time as the standard mefarshim, and this is no case. There's no exception. Okay, so I'm going to learn this like I want. So it says, "This is Torah where he bowed down to the house itself." Remember that name. Rav says, somebody bows down to a house. Asaro. Now it's not clear why if you bow down to the house you ask it. The pashtus is that's because of an issue of tfisa siyad adam, because once a human being had control over it, because before it was built, the stones and masonry were part of under human control. But that's not necessarily going to be the case. I mean, that's certainly not the entire case, as we shall see momentarily. Now, I'm going to go to the Pnei Moshe here for a moment, which I did not learn like in Shabbos, and will not adhere to completely here, but at this point I would like to go to what he says. If you look at the Pnei Moshe, it's in the middle of the narrow lines. There's a Hey Gimel. The first word in the line is Ayin Zayin, which stands for Avodah Zarah, of course. And then you have a Hey Gimel, Hachi Garsin, B'Shabbos, V'Girsa, Nechayna. Do you see that? Okay. The proper Girsa is Rabbi Zir and Rabbi Avo, B'Shem Rabbi Yeron said, Hamakdish the Bais, if you consecrate a house, also Malimbo, there's Me'ilah in it. Okay? So that's a similar issue. Is there Me'ilah by a house or not? Right? Because if the Me'ilah means it became true hektish. If there isn't Me'ilah, it's because it's Karka, and Karka there's no Me'ilah in it. Rabbi Zir said, Have Be'Rabbanan Pliga. Concerning this, the rabbis argue. Mandamara Saro, he who holds that when you bow down to a house, you make it forbidden. Malim, but there's also Me'ilah by house. Mandamar Lo Saro, he who says you don't make it forbidden, when you bow down to the house, because it's Mukhor B'Karka, a Malim, but there is no Me'ilah as well. Okay? Back to the Gemara. Hesiv Rabbi Chagai, Kumi Rabbi Yossi. You see that? Hesiv Rabbi Chagai in front of Rabbi Yossi? Okay? Doesn't the following brisa argue Rav? Because the following brisa seems to indicate that it's not so portioned. It's not so portioned that something which is connected to the ground is still considered to be something which is susceptible to the halachos of distinct from the ground. In other words, when Rav holds, and Mechuber L'Kar, you bow down to a house, you ask it, it's because he holds, even though it's been connected, it's considered still as if it has the quality of something which is separate from the ground, right? because we learned you can't answer ground itself. So what about the following case? So the following case is a shaker shabasela. You have a trough which goes through the stone. You can't use it for Poradum waters, because it says Poradum waters that the Mayim Chaim El Kelly. So this trough is not considered to be a Kelly, right? So Ve'emekachibo, one also cannot use it to mix the Poradum waters. Can't use it to put the waters in. Can't mix Paradum waters. When he can't sprinkle the Paradum waters from it. Interesting halacha. In order for a keli to avoid tumah, boil, or mace, it's got to have a tummy posel. It's got to have a tight seal. But if it's a separate ohel or a separate room in and of itself, so then it doesn't need a tight seal. It just needs a lid. So, he's saying that the trough in the stone is considered to be distinct, and it doesn't need a summit puzzle. It just needs a lid. It's not a keli. Okay? So far, all these things which are consistent. It's not a keli. The trough is not a keli. Okay? So it says more, ve'eno posels the mikvah doesn't pass mikvah, meaning water into which goes into it does not become mayim shuvim. It doesn't become drawn water. What if it was a keli and it was connected to the seed? In other words, it wasn't a trough in the stone, but rather it was made a keli separate and then embedded in the stone, right? So in that case, etc. Ad. Now this ad looks in one of the Sfarim I have actually interprets it as al daite, but it's a type. It's wrong. Ad here means ad. It means learn the brisa there up to Pesach mikvah. We had that a couple of times in Yerushalmi. It says, Gores ad, learn the rest of the brisa until you get to the end. So it means, V'chule ad, Pesach mikvah. In all these cases, if it was already a kelim, then it was embedded, so then it is a kelim. You can't put mechatos in, you can't do all these things, and it is metame, and it renders mikvah water mayim shuvim. There's a whole issue when you make pipes for a mikvah, what kind of pipes they can be, how they're made, because if it's a keli, then it's embedded in the mikvah, it's going to make mayim shuvim. So in any event, so he says, now here comes the punchline. It's because you connected it, because you carved it out and then connected it. Because that made it keli first. In other words, if you made the trough and then connected it, so it's considered to be a keli before you put it in the ground. But what if you connected it and then carved it out? So it's not a keli, right? And then it's not considered to be suitable for paraduma. It doesn't make mikvah waters mayim shuvim. So if that's the case, over here, you don't when you're making a house, when does the house become a house? Only if it's connected to the ground, before it's just plain stones. So therefore, if that's the case, it is mechuber l'karka. It should be like the trough, which you only complete after you put a cement in place. So to here, the house only becomes, the abonim only become a house after you cement them in place. By that time, they're already reconnected to the ground. So therefore, how can you answer them? Do you understand Gemara's question? Now, Lamaisa, at this point we see, according to my light, that Tfisas Yarodim is not really the issue. Because if Tfisas Yarodim is the issue, so what if you're connected to the ground? The Halacha by Avodah Zarah doesn't have to connect to the ground, not connect to the ground, has to Tfisas Yarodim, right? And what's Tfisas Yarodim? So we see here that this sugya is not going with the concept of Tfisas Yarodim. It's going with true mechuber versus quasi mechuber. What defines the difference between true mechuber and quasi mechuber? Where it was a kli before it was connected to the ground. So then, when it's connected to the ground, it remains quasi mechuber, and you can still bow down to it and answer it. Where it wasn't a kli, like the trough which you carved out and then put into the ground. Where it wasn't a kli before it's connected to the ground, so then in that case, even once you put it in the ground, it's not a keli any longer. It's not a keli. If you bow down to it, it's like bowing down to the ground. It doesn't aser it.
So let's say you built a house on a flatbed truck, and then you transport it, and then you put it on in the ground.
For sure, it'd be, for sure you can aser it. That for sure you can aser it. Because it's yeah, it's already what it was before it's going to the ground. Okay, now, unfortunately, don't learn like I did here. So they're, of course, all wrong. But that's, I think, very glad shot, and I don't have to change any gears. So I haven't changed any gearsos except for the ones that the Pnei Moshe changed on top, and everybody else goes to town, goes nuts changing gearsos, and from here on in they change even more. So says Mar Pasalok Rabbi Yochanan, you know what? The answer is like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said elsewhere, Situton shalabanim hukamar malachton. When you carve out stones, when you quarry them and then smooth them, that's considered to be the Gemar Malacha. The Gemar Malacha is not making the house, rather the Gemar Malacha is the shaping of the stone. So since that's the case, this is only quasi mechuber because the stone was considered to be a keli, what was tolish midakarka. Okay? Now, of course, not a kapal tuma. It's a plain stone. But in terms of Avodah Zarah, at that point, it's considered to be a keli, considered to be something which, when you that you made into a keli, and therefore, even though you connected it later on to the ground, you already have lost its status of mechuber. It can't become mechuber. You can become, therefore, to Rav holds, therefore you can answer it. Okay? So says the Gemara, Leisa do pliga Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Wait a second, says the Gemara. This Mishnah, which answers the stones, the brick, the wood, and the dirt, this hardens Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Shimon Lakish said a few blot ago, he said, Da'amar Avodah Zarah shenishbra muteres. Now, Avodah Zarah, which is broken, is mutter. Clearly, here we're talking about a broken Avodah Zarah, right? Talking about the stones, the dirt, and the wood from Avodah Zarah. So, Masar and Shimon Lakish holds Avodah Zarah nishtabra me'eleh, even if it broke on its own, is already mutter. So it says more, V'chein tzavim meimar, and didn't we learn, it's all part of the question. V'chein tzavim meimar, didn't we learn, Im basi lachzir and koli and divrei kol aser. If you're going to make it back into a keli again, is it aser? But here, obviously, the intent is not to make it back into a keli, right? So therefore, why here is it aser? So says the Gemara, Tipoter. You know what we're talking about? We're talking about Mishtachvel chol even v'even v'achakach b'noya. You bow down. It's a holy cathedral, right? So they bow down to every stone before they put it in. So therefore, even though now it's broken down again, the collection was broken down, but each stone retains the Shem Avodah Zarah, which they worshipped it before they put it into the cathedral wall. Okay? Fascinating svara. Okay? To some who say that I don't know why, but this Mechamai wants to say, and he bowed down to them again after they came out of the wall. I don't know why. It's Lamaisa. You bowed down to them before they went to the wall, even after they come out of the wall, they remain also. Okay? Says more Rabbi Yochanan. Now everybody goes nuts about this one line, and they say, "What is arguing Rabbi Yochanan?" They bring down, it's really going. They didn't Mishnayos on Daf Chav Daled, or going on other Mishnayos. What's arguing Rabbi Yochanan? But the truth is, in my opinion, it's partial. The Yerushalmi is learning that what's arguing Rabbi Yochanan? It means about it's arguing Rish Lakish. Just that it's arguing Rish Lakish because it says broken Avodah Zarah is also. But even Rabbi Yochanan holds broken Avodah Zarah is also. What about the even Rabbi Yochanan says Avodah Zarah, which is broken, is also, right? The Rabbi Yochanan Avodah Zarah shenishbara asura, then Avodah Zarah is broken is also. That was only stam. That's only if it's generic. But even he agreed. V'cheitz v'meimar, we had explained him. If you're not going to make it a keli again, divrei hakol mutter, right? And here you're not going to make it a keli again. Why are you not going to make it a keli again? So, Avodim, we understand. You might make it a keli again. You might rebuild the house. Offer, we understand. You might remake the house can use the mortar or the dirt. But eitzim, he's learning, Yerushalmi is learning, eitzim are wood from a tree, from an shiur tree. And once you took it off the tree, you can't put it back on the tree. So why here, Takeh, is it also once the tree broke off the tree? Because it's only also if you can put it back, right? But you can't put it back, and you can't put the twig back on the tree once you took it off.
Maybe they'll worship each twig just like they worship the Avodah.
They could, but there was worship beforehand. You couldn't worship the twig before it was planted. There was no twig. Okay? So how come it's also? No, Lamaisa, you're right. More answers like you. I shouldn't have been so hasty. Okay, that's Moira's answer. They bowed down to each twig before they planted it in. Okay? I'm telling you, wasn't that more pretty simple, relatively? Right? Oh, you see the Pnei Moshe goes nuts over here. He erases half the Gemara, he changes the other half of the Gemara. Ridbaz goes crazy, everybody goes crazy. Okay. Says the Gemara, it helps to have learned through Yerushalmi. Levi Amar, top of Rav Gimel. Levi Amar, Levi said, Mishtach v'lebayis asaro. If you bow down to house, it makes it asur, like Rab said. Lemara, if you bow down to a cave, lo asara. You don't asur it. Now he holds clearly the issue of Tisas Yad Adam, right? Ma bein bayis amor, what's the difference between a house and a cave? Amar Chanina ben Hillel, Rabbi Hillel bayis toyelo shas klisha. One time was severed from the ground. Ma'ara lo isalo shas klisha. Never had time was severed from the ground. Therefore, is no Tisas Yad Adam. Rabbi Hillel patam astisa begev v'nachri. Now this is going, but you should look back in Mishnah a second. Look back in Mishnah a minute on 42. Chaf gave Chaf Aleph and Beis. The Mishnah said at the Mishaya Beis Osama Beis Avodah Zarah. His house was next to the house of Avodah Zarah. The Nafhan became it fell down. Also, no, so you cannot build because you're going to support Avodah Zarah. By building your house, you're really retaining off of Avodah Zarah. So Kate said, so what do you do? You build in Ubona, and you make your house freestanding. So Shiloh, to begin with, how did you get a house like this? How did you build a house where the house was next to Avodah Zarah? You could say that. So for some reason, Rabbi Yochanan says differently. Rabbi Yochanan Potam Asisi says so about Beger v'Nochri Shioshu Saviyam Nochri. Right? They inherited each one inherited one house. One took the house which was a civilian house. And the other took the house which was our house. So says the Mara, the Lama Lopata, why do you live like Takshas Pedel? Lama Lopata, B'Shabbos Avodah Zarah, V'Nis Mecholo. Why didn't you learn it? That's story about a case where your house was there and Avodah Zarah came and moved next door. They built the church next door. So says the Mara, Tani, we learned, I'll tell you why. Because we learned the Brayz, it says, Tani Bayis, it should be Bayis, V'Nis Mecholo Avodah Zarah. A house and Avodah Zarah came afterwards next to it. V'Cholo, and then went away. In other words, Avodah Zarah left. It broke. Sorry, the wall broke. Mutter. You can put your wall back up where it was because you were not pushing. Were not pushing at to begin with. Avodah Zarah came to you, right? Because Avodah Zarah came to you, so therefore you can put your wall. If your wall collapses, you can put it right back up where it was. Okay, the only time you can't put the wall back up where it was, which is our Mishnah, where you can't build the wall back up, must therefore be a case where that Avodah Zarah didn't come to you, but somehow you inherited in jointly or something to that effect. Okay? So that's what one wants to say.
So, it collapsed. When you moved there was no Avodah Zarah. Then Avodah Zarah
came, and then your house collapses.
So when you're putting the wall back up,
you can put up the wall right next to Avodah Zarah.
Avodah Zarah.
Doesn't matter, but we take into account the fact that they came second.
So it's grandfathered in, and originally was not.
That's right, it's grandfathered. Good way of putting it. Okay, so that's what he says.
Is that the Marasayan issue?
He could
People know that it was grandfathered originally. It was not Avodah Zarah, And now you're helping build.
I don't know, maybe because that's the way it was, so therefore you're not allowed to put it back to where it was. I mean, there could be a Chashash Marasayim, but Chazal decided that since that's the way it was for many years, so therefore there's no need, and people will probably. Yeah, okay, fine. You're right. Look, we could find Antisurim, that's true. Okay. How'd you get here?
Oh, I take sailing lessons on Monday and Wednesday. So,
Sailing?
Yeah. So we dumped in the lake today. We had to dump the boat. You capsized it. So that's why I'm like, it's over 8:30. So my wife drives me here.
You capsized?
Yeah, you have to.
Did anybody drown?
No.
Oh, what
I wear life jackets.
Oh.
You can't go sailing without wearing a life jacket.
So they capsized the boat on purpose?
Yeah. To show you that you can ride it again. When you pull on the centerboard, it's a small boat, 12.5 feet. When you pull on the centerboard, it pops up and there's no water in it.
Okay.
It's amazing. You have to pull yourself back in the boat, though, but the boat's all the way up here now.
Okay, neat. Okay. Boy, you're a really exotic kind of guy. Okay, so so again, Tani, Bayis, it should be V'nis B'chol Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah came next to V'chakol Chol and then went Mutar. In other words, it means your wall fell down. You can rebuild it. Avodah Noach Joshua Saviem, Nochi, but a ger and a goy who in common inherited their father. Who's a Nochi Asura, you can't rebuild it if it falls down. There we don't grandfather you in because it wasn't yours to begin with. Tani Bayis, we also learned the Baisa, the same idea. Bayis, V'nitz B'chol Avodah Zarah, and a house came next, you had a house and Avodah Zarah came built next to you, Chakol Chol, and it fell, Mutz, you can build it right back on again. Avim Bohu V'nitz B'chol Avodah Zarah. But woe unto you if you went and you built your house right next to Avodah Zarah. In other words, Avodah Zarah, you built your house up right next to an Avodah Zarah, which was pre-existing. In that case, Kol Habayis Hashem Avodah Zarah. It's I don't know if it's to be taken literally, but we have to knock down. You have to knock down your entire buy a house. It seems like. In other words, if you build up your house in a way that's sustained or looks like sustained or retained by the Avodah Zarah, you got to knock down the whole thing. That's what it sounds like here. Rabbi Yosef said, "Masisa Amar Kain." The Brisa teaches us, if the house, the Brisa, the Mishnah, actually, Mishnah which says, we can learn the Mishnah this way, that the Mishnah is talking about, a case where you're not allowed to rebuild your house. And that's why it says, if the walls fall down, between you and the Avodah Zarah, so then you just split the stones and go away. Why? Because each stone, each of the stones are half owned by your house and half owned by the other house, but you can't rebuild it. So it sounds like taka. If you build next to Avodah Zarah and then it fell, so you can't rebuild the house. So I'm not sure if you actually have to knock it down. It sounds like you don't really have to knock it down, but if it falls down, you're not allowed to rebuild it. Okay? It's kind of ambiguous. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting that right, but in any event, that's what it seems. Okay, Shlosha Batimei. There are 3 houses. Baisha B'no Mitchila Avodah Zarah, a house which was initially built for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, Harei Asur, it's forbidden. Sido V'chiv, in other words, you built it for the purpose of worshiping it. That seems to be the pshat. Sido V'kido L'Shem Avodah Zarah, if you plastered and put on sculptings in there, or moldings, for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, V'chidesh, and you put in new stuff in general, for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, no Tomashachidesh, you take that which you were Mechadish. If you just brought in an idol, a Buddha or something, well, Buddha's not necessarily Avodah Zarah, and you took it out, Votzia, raise a mutter, it's okay. What? Rabban holds Buddhists are of the Avodah Zarah.
What?
Rabban holds Buddhists are of the Avodah Zarah.
Buddhists is Avodah Zarah?
It's a long story. Yeah. Okay. So obviously the Taliban holds Buddha's Avodah Zarah, right? The Taliban.
The Muslims.
The Muslims.
Terrorists.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Okay.
Make you put a star
They're not terrorists. They're just very frum. Okay.
Yeah, very cool.
They get along very well, Meishor. Yes. So, in any event, So again, Rav Rabbi Yochanan. Sorry, I think more again. Rav Rabbi Yochanan. We didn't start yet. Anyway, so Rav Rabbi Yochanan, Tarvayin Armin. Rav Rabbi Yochanan both said, "Bachnosan son lorati masisa." I'm going to learn the sugya like mine, like I want, not like the unfortunate learner, because I didn't find what they said reasonable. Rav Yochanan Tarvayin Armin, they both said, "Bachnosan son lorati masisa." Our Mishnah is talking about when they entered Eretz Yisrael. In other words, the houses they found when they entered Eretz Yisrael, they had three statuses: bayis, which is Avodah Zarah mamish; a bayis where there were moldings and plasters, Shem Avodah Zarah; and a house where there was an Avodah Zarah inside. Okay? Three types of houses. Says Ma'adaiti to Rab, Domrim V'shtachavel Abayis Asoro. According to Rab, who says if he bowed down to the house, it forbids it. Beginning came Batal because that's he understands that when he came to Eretz Yisrael, any time in history. So he bows down to the house. It makes the house also. What do you have to say it's about when they entered Eretz Yisrael, Dafka? Furthermore, Ma'adaiti to Rabbi Yochanan. Also, Duamar said, Hamakdish Zabayis should be Molimbo. That's Pnei Moshe fixed it before. Hamakdish Zabayis Molimbo says if you're Makdish house, you're moil in it, which is, as we said, Chobetz and Beis are two sides of the same shito, right? That means that even a house can receive a status of Hekdesh or Avodah Zarah. So how come we have to learn that's talking about when they entered Eretz Yisrael? Same question. How can you, any time during history, somebody can ask their house? Says more, Viftereh, we'll continue the question. Viftereh Mishtachvel Bayis, let him learn the Mishnah when it's been bowed down to the house. Says more, very basic and important answer. HaMishtachvel Bayis Yesh Lo Bitul. If a guy bows down to the house, and then the guy breaks the house down, you're okay. Okay? Or even if he doesn't break the house down, I take that back. It was a bad example. If a guy bows down to the house and then decides not to worship the house, so that's a bitul avodah zarah done by a goy, it cancels avodah zarah. However, it's what they found, the houses they found when they entered Eretz Yisrael, ein lo bitul, you can't be mevatel that. Okay, that which you choose to go when they entered Eretz Yisrael had no bitul. So if that's the case, the Gemara says, so Ketzad Oisa. Now, according to Pnei Moshe, others learn differently. Others learn, this is talking about a different scenario. But the way Pnei Moshe learned to be, it can't be that when they entered Eretz Yisrael, they have to knock down all the Canaanite houses which were there. So how are they going to, if they're not allowed to use them though, and the Canaanites cannot be mevatel them, so what are they going to do? How are they going to possibly use the houses? So it says the Gemara, what did they do when they entered Eretz Yisrael? Again, this Pnei Moshe holds that it's talking about when they entered Eretz Yisrael, what did they do? So according to him, it's talking about Mifparek es Psimov. The special halacha that if you knock down the mezuzahs and put up your own mezuzahs, then it's yours. Now, this is not necessarily true throughout human history, but it's true when they entered Eretz Yisrael. What they had to do is knock down the doorpost and put up a new doorpost. Okay?
A lot of houses have terrace, and they knocked down and they found gold and silver.
I know a lot. There were. I don't know a lot. Okay. The Shayat so learned, it's Taka talking about, it's not that when they entered Eretz Yisrael. When they entered Eretz Yisrael, whatever happened was war on the bridge, they Taka to knock down all the houses. So about if a goy built a house, L'Shem Avodah Zarah, how is he mevatel it? And the answer is that he's mevatel it by breaking down the doorposts. Okay? So no, it's not talking about how they entered Eretz Yisrael, the Tak remain also. Let's say about a regular goy throughout history, you build a house for Avodah Zarah if he knocks down the doorpost and is okay. Okay.
This is in Borough Park. See them go buy a house and they gut it and then they start again.
It happens in Lincolnwood a lot too. Happens in Lincolnwood.
Really?
Yes. So it says have you don't drive into Lincolnwood ever? Oh, try it once. Okay. Says the Gemara. I understand. What? Yeah, that was from. I think it's Skokie. The certain streets the same way.
Because the Mistachim owned it, and now the Hasidim are buying it, so you have to knock it down.
And let's see it. Okay, says where Rabbi Elishem Rabbi Lezer said, "Ever had Mistachim before? I'm not aware that the Mistachim ever habitated there." Yeah, okay. So that it merged with the other. It's called the Youngins Bethel.
I think it merged.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll die to Rabbi Lezer.
The Rabbi Eliezer, Shnei Batim, I'm sorry, it's good. Rabbi Hillel B'Shem Eliezer said, Vushin Nichnis L'Tochen Avodah Zarah. Now, nobody knows exactly what this is going on. Which part of the Mishnah? The Mishnah had three parts: the building of a house for Avodah Zarah, putting up molding and plaster for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, and the third case was, of course, putting it in Avodah Zarah temporarily. So he can't be going on in the third case, because that's the third case says. So going one of the first two cases. So the Shara learns he's going on the first case in the Mishnah. That even when you build that house for purpose of Avodah Zarah, it's only you put the getchka in there while you're building it. Okay? I don't think it's right about that, because I think from the whole thing that the Gemara said about Mishtachav Elabais and comparing Mishtachav Elabais to building a house of Avodah Zarah, they're talking about when the house itself is not Avodah Zarah. So rather, it's talking about the plaster and the moldings. That's what I think it's talking about. And you put it in the plaster mold, it's only considered to be for purpose of Avodah Zarah if there's an Avodah Zarah in the room when you're doing it. Otherwise, it's decorative. Because the Greeks and the Romans, they make decorative depictions of the gods, and they didn't really mean this gods. They meant just for decoration, right, for wallpaper. So that's got to be that the Avodah Zarah is there at the time. Says Rabbi Eliezer, Shtei Batim Heim. There should only be two houses, Batim and Shlosha Batim. In other words, so the second case and the third case should be sandwiched together. They should be scrunched together. Because it's both but Avodah Zarah is put into the building, right? So why are they three separate cases? It says we are Kan L'Shos. In the second case, it's talking about when you just put it in the it's putting in temporarily. Why you're putting up the I don't know if they're actually which is which L'Shos, but I'm not sure which statement means temporary, which means to stay. But the bottom line is that one case you're putting up the Avodah Zarah for the purpose of Avodah Zarah itself. Where are you going? You're going to be getting a tissue? Oh, okay, fine. For a second you get something, but never mind. Okay. So with the one case, dressed nautically, Taco. The one case, it's a cold night to go sailing. The one case, it's for the purpose of Avodah Zarah. For the purpose of Avodah Zarah itself, meaning to have the Avodah Zarah in the house. That's the third case. The second case, the purpose of the Avodah Zarah is not to have the Avodah Zarah in the house, but to have the Avodah Zarah present at the time that you're building these moldings and these plasters. Okay?
But the Avodah Zarah itself is temporary. It's mobile. You can take it in and then out of the house. So if you take it out of the house, and there's molding, so the molding is still...
The molding's got to go.
It's got to go.
Because that indicates that they're putting out the moldings for Avodah, a correlation. Okay? Shlosha Avanim, the three stones. Three stones. Now, the Or Sameach, in the Kedusha Gramas, says that this whole halacha ches is not talking about Avodah Zarah, it's talking about Mishamshei Avodah Zarah. Okay? The accessories of the Avodah Zarah. For example, the Shlosha Avanim are the pedestals which go under the Avodah Zarah. Right? I didn't even notice how nautically you were dressed.
Oh.
So yeah, I can imagine on the lake. It's on the lake, these lessons?
Yeah.
Must be even colder.
Yeah.
Okay. Shlosha, they're an old salt. Well, it's not salt water. Okay. Shlosha Avanim, there are three stones. Three pedestals. Okay? So again, this is according to the Or Sameach about Mishamshei Avodah Zarah, not about Avodah Zarah itself. A stone which was quarried initially for the purpose of a bimus. A bimus is like a bima, a stage, a pedestal. Okay, hareza asura. It's immediately forbidden. If you plastered it and molded it for the purpose of Avodah Zarah and made all sorts of new things on it, no tomash you just take that which you put on it. If it was not made of Avodah Zarah, but you put on Avodah Zarah silka and then removed Avodah Zarah, raise them with hers, it's forbidden. Rabbi Babashem Rabbi said, "Mizuv," and this we derive from Yutachim Avodah Zarah. Those things which are cast for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, they're immediately osir, right? The Nasr Miyad. Yerushalmi Avodah said, "Mizuv," and this we learn Hametich kois Avodah Zarah neser miyad. Same idea, right? If you, what's the word? Cast. Thank you. I just said it a minute ago. Cast the cup for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, it immediately comes also. Says more, wait a minute. Rabbi Hila b'Shem said, Vushemida le'Avodah Zarah. It's a contradiction. Rabbi Hila said, name of Avodah Zarah. Name of Rabbi Hila said, name of Rabbi Hila said, you have to actually put Avodah Zarah on top of it. So, which is it? Is it immediately only put Avodah Zarah on top of it? So it says, basically, it's the same so we have in the Bavli. It's an extra. Azmona Milsa, Azmona Lab Milsa. Only here it's Azmona for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, not for the purpose of tefillin or some other mitzvah. Designation, what's its status? So it says, Gemara, Mechav Shita say it's a kasha, it's a contradiction in Rabbi Eliezer. It says you're Rabbi, it should be Rabbi Eliezer. Tamar Ameb Mizu Ametich L'Kois Avodah Zarah Neser Miyad becomes immediately forbidden. And here it says so you put Avodah Zarah on it. Patalaka the Tanya learns like this, but like this price. The Tanya we learned over there. Avodah Zarah shel Nochi Asucha Miyad belongs to a guy, becomes us immediately. Why? So a guy is an Oived Avodah Zarah in and of itself. So therefore, the moment he makes something for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, this is Avodah Zarah. However, Shel Yisrael Mishatei Avad, a Jew, we hope he'll do tshuva. We know he doesn't really mean to worship Avodah Zarah, so only becomes also once he uses it for the purpose of worship. Okay? Says the Mara, Klum Pligin, Law Avodah Zarah, Plum Pligi Law. Where do we find this machloikes about, or the dichotomy actually, between Avodah Zarah of a Goy and Avodah Zarah of Yisrael, by Avodah Zarah? Dilma b'Mishamsha, if you want to say the same machloikes applies to Mishamshi Avodah Zarah, to the pedestals, which is the topic of our Mishnah, says the Mara, yes. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, Mishamshi Avodah Zarah machlokas. Let's talk the same machlokas. Now, here we have to do a little bit of cutting and pasting here, Rabbi Isai. Let's go to, right after the next Mishnah. Okay, Rabbi Yami b'Shem Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar, Pitech b'pituchim eina b'tela. Look, if you made the decorations not by molding and plaster, but by actually carving into the stone itself, then it becomes ulcer. And Lachein Tzrich, and the Chiddush is, I feel heavier Pisuchim. Even if you removed the Pisuchim, it still remains ulcer. Why is that? Because Pisuchim are more severe, because the Pisuchim are not plaster on top and moldings on top, but rather engraved. That's right. Okay?
So it's like the coin. It's
the same idea, right? Okay? Going back to the top of the page, Rabbi Hila said, Vusha Mida Le'Avodah Zarah. Now this is again going according to our opinion in the second case in the Mishnah. The Siyad B'Kir, L'Shem Avodah Zarah, is only if when you had Avodah, when you were adorning the pedestal with all sorts of Avodah Zarah images, there was an Avodah Zarah actually sitting on top of the pedestal, right? Says my Dr. Rabbi Lezer Shtef on him. Again, according to Rabbi Lezer, it's only two stones because the second and third case are both talking about where the Avodah Zarah is atop the pedestal. But in the end, we say there are three stones. So it's more kan l'sho. So one case is Avodah Zarah is put in there for the purpose of the Avodah Zarah staying there temporarily. The other place, the Avodah Zarah is not even it's built there for the purpose of staying there as long as you do the plaster. So the two different cases of putting the Avodah Zarah on top of what purpose they're there. Okay? Says Mishnah further, Allah Shol Shasheris, and the three types of Asheros. Ilon Shenoto Mitchilu Shem Avodah Zarah, tree which is planted from the Kitko for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, Hareza also it's forbidden. Gido Pislo Shem Avodah Zarah. If you, what's the word? Prune the tree. You prune the tree and shape the tree for the purpose of Avodah Zarah. Ve'echlif, and new branches grew where you were doing the pruning and shaping. You just have to take whatever grew after you did the pruning and shaping. Okay? Vehemi tachlis Avodah Zarah bitla. If you to put out Avodah Zarah under the tree and then cancel the Avodah Zarah, then Hareza mutar, the tree is mutar. Okay? Says Maratani, skipping the part we did before, is the first three lines of Maratani. Hirki, what if you grafted something onto the tree for the purpose of Avodah Zarah? Noito mashi hirki, to take off that which you grafted, which makes sense, right? Rabbi Yana said, should be in the name of Shimon Lakish, It's got to be for the purpose of Avodah Zarah. What you graft the birds Avodah Zarah, so you have to remove it. Otherwise, the tree remains also. Now, skipping the next line, the Orsameach raises it. Mechabashi does for Shimon Lakish. Contrary to Shimon Lakish. Tamanam Rabbi Ami said previously in Rish Lakish. Pasach bapisuchim ein abtel. If you make engravings and carving, they can't be cancelled. The kol marachen. Here he says just cut off the grafted part. Why? If it's integral, it should be integral in both, and if it's not integral, it should not be integral in both. So we obviously can answer the question. How would you answer the question? How would you answer the question?
You have in mind, just whatever he grafted was the Avodah Zarah, and the original tree was not.
Two lamdish. Says the Gemara, still two lamdish. You're saying two mechshrei lamdish. Says the Gemara, choymer hu b'pisuach. Right? Did I read the whole question before? I didn't. Chavish l'ser shalosh. Tamar Rabbi Ami himself by pisuchim and abtelim. Sarm meimar pilu heavy or some pisuchim. He didn't move the engraving. It's no good. But Kol Marachin here says okay. Choymer hu b'pisuach. So it's engraved into it, so therefore it's worse. Very Baal-Batish answer. Okay? Engraved in is worse than being grafted on. Oh, is that what you meant to say? No. Okay, I say what? Yeah. Okay, it's a very partial answer. Okay, now with the next, the mission just repeats itself. The Mar just repeats itself, so we'll skip a line. Re'il Hashem is the same as they said before. Vushem Hashem Avodah Zarah. The middle case of pruning for the purpose of Avodah Zarah is only if you put Avodah Zarah there at the time. So there's more Zaita Rabbi Lazar, Shtei Asheros, saying that it's only two Asheros because both the middle case in the Mishnah and last case in the Mishnah is talking about where you planted an Avodah Zarah there. Utina Shlosh Asheros, saying we learned the three Asheros. There's a Margain, Kan L'Shoah. So in one case you put the Avodah Zarah there only at the time that you're grafting, if it's for that purpose, and there it's actually more severe because that makes the grafts of Avodah Zarah which must be cut off. Whereas last case in the Mishnah, so about case you put Avodah Zarah there independent, any pruning there, all you have to do is remove the Avodah Zarah. Okay? Ezu Asherah, how do we know it's an Asherah? Kol Shetachteh Avodah Zarah. Anything which is underneath Avodah Zarah. Now, according to Tanakama, they don't worship the tree. What do they worship? The Avodah Zarah under the tree. The tree is only an awning on the Avodah Zarah, Asherah.
You mean they have a pesel under the tree?
It's like a tombstone.
What?
It's like a tombstone.
What is a tombstone?
Well, it's sitting on top of the grave.
It's not a grave here. No, it's not Avodah Zarah.
It's not really a grave, it's saying that.
It's like the presents under the Christmas tree.
Yeah, so
Kids worship the present.
Right.
The corollary of the Spindel principle? Okay.
This girl.
It's the Christian manifestation of the Spindel principle. Okay. Okay. Should write a book. Okay. So they have to actually worship the tree. Okay. Maisa B'tzira is a mice inside and Be'ilan Shri Ovdim Osa was a tree they worship. Vayitachtei Gal, and there was underneath it an avalanche. What is it called? A pile of stones. Okay. Amalem Rabbi Shimon said to them fast. He said, "Go check out this pile of stone." Ubaku, and they checked it out. Motzabotu, and they found a getchke in there, Avodah Zarah underneath. So he said, "L'shitasa." Amalem, he said, "Hoyle tzurei notim, not the lem esoilam." Since they're worshiping the tzura, the getchke and the pile underneath, so therefore the tree is mutter, because it's consistent with his approach. His approach is that a dafka is worship of the tree, which makes the asherah, not worship of a idol under the tree. Okay? They're arguing generically. In other words, we don't know what's going on with the tree. Manikim. So it says, what does he mean to say? Im davar bari shein ovdin l'tzura uli lan. He means to say, if it's clear what we're explaining Rav Chisda here. It might be Rav Chisda speaking himself, but we're explaining Rav Chisda. Im davar bari shein ovdin l'tzura uli lan. If we know they worship both the idol and the tree. They worship both simultaneously. Divrei kol aser, everybody agrees that it's aser. V'im davar b'ay shem, both of them are also, right? Both the tree and the idol. V'im davar b'ay shem, if it's clear they worship the idol, they don't worship the tree, divrei hakol mutar, everybody agrees that the tree is okay. Okay, what we're talking about is mistap. Generically, we're not clear on what's going on. Rabbi Shimon Stam and Oivdim L'Tzura, in general, we assume that they're worshiping the Tzura, the Tzura, and it should be the Einam Oivdim L'Ilon. As we could transpose to the next sentence. They're worshiping the tree, and they're worshiping the Avodah Zarah, and they don't worship the tree. So therefore, the tree remains mutter, right? Rabbanan Amrei, Rabbanan holds Stam and Omri of the Tzura, the Ovdim L'Ilon should be. Okay, as transposed to all the Mepharshim do it. And they worship the tree, the shape, and they worship the tree. So Rabbi say in the Mishnah, even according to Rabbanan, it's not that they worship the Avodah Zarah underneath, and therefore the tree becomes also. But it's not like Mishamshe Avodah Zarah. But rather, Rabbanan assume B'stam that you're worshiping both the Avodah Zarah underneath and the tree above. Okay? Says the Gemara, V'kasha, we have difficult. Now, for some reason, all the Mepharshim say this. For some reason, this is an assumption we have, which we leave difficult. Rabbi Shimon argues on Chachamim, and does a Maisa like he holds. For some reason, it seems that the Shas thing is in Ephraim brings it down. Moshe. Others say that it seems that Rabbi Shimon doesn't normally argue in Rabbanan. Don't ask me, I don't know. Shimon doesn't argue in Rabbanan. So I can hear he's arguing Rabbanan, and if he's, I'm sorry, usually doesn't argue Rabbanan, does a Maisa against them, right? He did a Maisa against them. Here, he uncovered the avalanche under the tree to reveal the Getchka, and then he was marked to the tree. How could he possibly do a Maisa? So some Rabbanim, I guess, did a Maisa against Rabbanan. In other words, even though Yochid Rabbin and Lachik Rabbin, they held that they were right, and therefore they were marked to the Rabbin. But Rabbi Shimon, we know, wouldn't do such a thing. So it's a kasha why in this case he actually did it. Okay. Halachida, lo yeshay b'tzilah shouldn't sit in the shade of Avodah Zarah. If you should stand in the shade of Avodah Zarah, tohar. Now that shade is talking about, it's not talking about directly on the, just wildly. It's not talking about directly underneath the tree. Those guys running past here, right? It's color war. So it's not talking about where they're running directly on the tree, but rather, if I have a tree, this is the tree, right? Oh, it's not a tree. This is the tree. So then there's shade directly underneath. If you walk directly underneath, you're tummy. But if the sun is hitting at an angle, so the shade makes shade beyond the tree. If you walk in that shade beyond the tree, you're not tummy. Okay?
It's like an ohel, tummy ohel.
Right. It's the same idea. You got to be, so to speak, on the ohel, except that it's not going to be the same idea. We'll see. They want, but it seems from the Mishnah you're correct. Okay? So, if you will pass directly underneath the tummy. What if this tree was stealing from the masses? Meaning its foliage was going where it shouldn't go. You walk underneath it, tohar. Now, from this, what it's going to do is clear it's about Tumah the Rabbanim, because Tumah the Raisa wouldn't make a difference, if it's because the tree is in Rishus Harayim, Rishus Harayim wouldn't make a difference. Okay. Zorim tachtei rockets, you plant underneath it vegetables in the winter, because the shade is harmful. But not in the summer when the shade is beneficial to it. Vachazeron, lettuce, it's always beneficial, the shade. Can't do it, plant it in the shade, not in the summer, not in the winter. Also not vegetables in the winter, because the shavings off the tree, whatever you call it, the leaves, whatever comes off the tree, pours upon them, and you consider them fertilizer. Okay, so that's all. Says more, now the truth is the same Moshe gets into an issue. Then Rabbi Yossi said before, you can grind up Avodah Zarah and scatter it to the wind. You don't have to actually put in Yama Melach, you don't have to put it in the Dead Sea, so that no can get an off from it. So he gives an answer. Okay, the Bible deals with it, not for us. Says about Taman Hashem Rechis, it's said name Rechis Tzila also. Its shade is forbidden. Sel Tzila Mutter. The shade of its shade is Mutter. Ezu tzela, tzel tila of ezu tila. What's the shade of a shade? What's a shade? Tamar, they said, koshi utipo vino gaspo zel tila. In other words, if this is the tree, when it falls like this. Anything which is when it falls is within that radius, that height. Excuse me. It's not. It's considered to be tail, and it's also you can't walk underneath it, even though it's on a tummy, unless you walk directly underneath. But it's only you're still allowed to work even if it's not matami you under the shade of it itself. Anything where it falls and it's not going to touch ground, and you're walking there and it happens because the angle of the sun at that moment to provide you with a shade, that's not a problem. Okay? That you can use. Says the Gemara, why is tzila asur? Mishum shubano. Would sound like why now to ride better from the shade of the shade of the tree or the Avodah Zarah tree because it's hana. I can't also bano, but a grave, a mausoleum, is also bano because it belongs to the mace, right? The tzila mutter allowed to take refuge in the shelter of the shade of a mausoleum. Thank you. So,
why is it also bano? Because you're getting benefit from the mace.
Right. Obviously this hana is mutter. I never tire of telling over the story about my brother when he was working in Matityahu like 20 some odd years ago. So they were working, the grapes were not kilayim. What's wrong? They were orla. So the Shah asked the Tzitz Eliezer whether they could throw the grapes. Nobody can eat them. Can they have grape fights? They'll throw grapes at each other. Or is that considered to be the hana, which is also because you're not allowed to have hana from orla. So he said that's mutter. So this is the same idea here, right? Even though kever is also bano, not all hanos are also. Means any tangible benefit from it, but not the hana you get from splattering somebody with a bunch of unripe grapes, or the hana you get from the shade of walking under the shadow of the mausoleum, right? What do you want to say?
No, I'm just thinking you grew up as a paramount to jail 20 years ago.
Yeah. Say it like that. Okay? Are you working about the tail at the time?
No, I was not there. Depends on how it's going to grapes.
Yeah.
Depends where from Silver Spring. The beginning part when you first started.
Yeah. That was the beginning part, right?
That's a good color one.
They were still trying to make money off farming at the time. They gave up later on. Okay. Started as a Moshav Shitufi and then became Moshav Ovdim, the whole thing. Anyway, be that as it may, Arei HaKever also by Novatilo Mutter, the Tzel is Mutter, Arei Heichel. The Heichel in the Beis HaMikdash, the structure of Beis HaMikdash, Arei also by no. It's also by no. Rabbi Yochanan Zaka Yeshe B'Shoyim, Betzilo Sheichel, he used to sit and learn in the shadow of the Heichel. Now the truth is the shade of the Kaisel should be the same thing, right? The shade of the Kaisel should be also by no, right? Because it's wall of Beis HaMikdash, but obviously that's not the type of hana, which is also. You're not allowed to take a chip off the stone. That's me'ilah, perhaps even. Especially according to Argamor, because Molin bebayis, right? So you're not allowed to take a chip off the stone, you're not allowed to derive hana from it, But, so what you have to do. But you're allowed to derive that hana of shade. So have a late timer, take out the word the low, the Ridbaz takes out, have a late time, Mishum Shu'asa, but no, the reason is not because of Asa B'Isanoah, but rather because of a Chomer and Avodah Zarah. It doesn't say it explicitly here, but the Ridbaz puts it in, it's our Chokah, because it's very Avodah Zarah. So also says because of Chomer Avodah Zarah. In other words, shade is derechla, not the type of prohibition, type of hana which is banned, but only in this case over here. Okay? Because of Avodah Zarah. So it says in Marabi Amishin Rabban Tamon says, Zoso Meres, the fact we draw these dichotomies teach us she'ain tumas, it should be Avodah Zarah. So tumas Avodah Zarah muchaveres. It's clear that tumas Avodah Zarah is not the Raisa. The located, if that was the case, ilu kever shu gozos harami v'avatach daftar. It said in our Mishnah, if you go under an asher, which is over the area of Rishus Harabim, so remain tar. it was a kever, which is Matami Doraisa Be'oel, and it was, a mausoleum was extending over the Yerushalmi, you'd still be Tameh, even though it's doing Shalokadin, right? Because that's a mutable Doraisa Halacha. If you're going to say the tree which has the awning or foliage over Yerushalmi, you pass underneath it's Amatami, it clearly indicates that Avodah Zarah's tumah is not Doraisa. Okay? Gamliel Zuga. Gamliel Zuga is Gamliel the barber. He appears a couple of places in Yerushalmi. Hayim Mistamech Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Now here it means that Shimon Lakish was leaning on him. Because he was the barber, Shimon Lakish was the rabbi, okay? Matum Bu Tavnis, so they came to certain Avodah Zarah called Tavnis. Normally it said, Ma'am Uver Kamoy, can I pass in front of it? The Gamliel Zuga obviously asked Lakish what to do. So he said, Avar Kamoy, pass in front of him, Sami Eine, and close my eyes. Okay, in other words, he's telling him, you're allowed, you're allowed to pass in front of Avodah Zarah if you close your eyes as you're passing by. This is not a good thing if you are driving. Even Reish Lakish, the only reason it worked is because Gamliel Zuga was leading him, so therefore, he can close his eyes. Gamliel would have to leave his eyes open, I guess. Says Rabbi Yitzhak Bar Masi, every time Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yitzhak Bar Masi was supporting Rabbi Yochanan. Matun Tzalmo de Bule, they came to the Tzalmo de Bule, Shara Teres brings on pain that this is a city called Istanbul. I don't even know what Istanbul is. I don't know if it's Istanbul. I don't think Rabbi Yochanan ever left Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, so he says, "Mani ever come make we pass in front of it? Only ever come? Oh, yes, go the Sami and close my eyes." Rabbi Yaakov Reidi have a Mistan Rabbi Shimon Levi. The Rabbi Yaakov Reidi was being supported by Shimon Levi. Matul Nuturi Talmud. Now, everybody here says that this is the Colossus of Rhodes. They came to see the They came from the Colossus of Rhodes. You know the Colossus of Rhodes? Of course, you know Colossus of Rhodes.
Yes,
Okay, so it says Gemara. Amalei, so he said, Nachumish Gamzu. So Rabbi Shimon Levi said to Rabbi Yaakov Bereide was supporting him. Nachum is Kodesh Kodashim. I read it wrong. Nachum, the Holy of Holies, he was the guy who never looked at the imprint on a coin because it was a raised image, right?
We said it was a ring.
We said it was a ring. So Nachum is Kodesh Kodashim. Avad, he passed by the Colossus. I guess he went on a boat. But Leisad Ovar, you don't want to pass. Go in front of it and just close your eyes. Okay? Says, we're getting back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says you shouldn't plant all sorts of vegetables and stuff under the tree because it's going to get the leaves as they fall down and it's going to accelerate the growth. Right? So it says the Gemara, actually he said, yeah. So he says, Leisla Plige, Rabbi Yochanan, I'm lost my place. Leisla Plige, Rabbi Yochanan, Avodah Zarah Shishtabra Asura. Rabbi Yochanan said it's true, Avodah Zarah which is broken is also. Yes, he said that. But, Lo Kain Sarvim, but then we already say a blad ago, two blad ago. If you're not going to ever put it back, it's okay. And here you ain't going to put the dead leaves back on the tree. So why is it usher over here? Why is it usher? As leaves fall off the tree and become fertilized, it should be okay because nishtabra me'eleh, we have no intent of putting it back.
Maybe they worship the leaves too.
Huh?
It's the same as I said earlier.
I don't know if I'd want to give that answer. So it says Morah's answer things better in this case. Not always, but in this case Morah's answer is better. Says sorry about that. Those are the breaks. So it says what about Avodah Zarah Shel Yisrael. So about a Jewish Avodah Zarah in our Mishnah. Jewish Avodah Zarah is even if you break them apart, they're not batel. It's hard to become a Jewish Avodah Zarah. But it becomes that it's hard to be involved. Let's all plead out the Rav. It's not arguing. It's our Mishnah arguing Rav. The Rav Amar Tzorka Hi Asura, because Rav said whatever is necessary for its own purpose is also, but something which is not necessary for the purpose is not also, right? So says the Gemara Tzorka again. Lays up the Plia Rav. The Rav Amar Tzorka. So whatever is necessary for the tree is also V'shvuya Mutari, but the pieces which came off are mutter. So two years pieces came off should be mutter, whatever fell off the tree. Or hiti pati. Even this we can answer Avodah Zarah Shel Yisrael. We're more machmir avodah zarah of a Jew.
The implication is that a guy is more likely to mevatel his avodah zarah than a Jew.
Not quite. We name Akor Pashim, and why are we more machmir and separate ourselves more from the avodah zarah of a Jew, which is really a question. Nation nibula ra, because it's repugnant. No, it's more repugnant. But avodah zarah are willing to be more lenient because it's not as repugnant. But avodah zarah of a Jew, a Jewish avodah zarah is very
What you expected, but not
right, exactly. Okay. Nothing meno eitzim. Now, luckily, I'm really going to wing it a little bit. I did look at it, but I didn't actually expect to get up there. Nothing meno eitzim asur. But how can I stop on time for my chas v'sholom here, Baruch? Nothing meno eitzim asur manoya. If you took wood for this asher chidos manoya, he's the way if you used to stoke your oven. Im chodesh, if the oven is new, you thought you break it. Because that means that, so really, sugim psachim, it helped strengthen the oven. So the oven became now, strengthened by avodah zarah. It is also by not. In Yoshev, the oven was old, it was ready, fully forged. You talk.
Also the marble of the tavern or something?
The first time you cook in it. It was that's what forges it. If it's old one, you just have to cool it down before cooking the house. Otherwise, the pasta you bake the bread in with the oven before you cool it down. In other words, the same law as avodah zarah pasta surah banoya. Now do I benefit from that bread? Yisar b'chez, that piece of bread got mixed into other piece of bread. Kulna sauce banoya, all of banoya. If you have, let's say, 100 pieces of bread, one of them would go with avodah zarah. You take one of them, toss into the yam hamelach, right? He says, the amount which you nana, but not the entire mixture. They said, no, ain't piece on avodah zarah. You don't know if that's the right one. It's like a redemption process. You want to redeem the awesome one by throwing one into the yam hamelach. You can't redeem avodah zarah. There's no such thing. Says, said, that which we to say that if it got mixed in to other ones, you can use it. According to Eliezer, can't use it according to Rabbanan. So it's machlokas b'stam. What do you mean b'stam? Manukayim. What are we talking about? Im la'asik. If you're going to use it for heat, everybody would agree it's okay because heat, it seems, comes from the wood. Not from the wood itself, but rather it comes after the wood is burnt. So ever since wood comes after wood is burnt to heat, so therefore everybody agrees it's mutter to burn this wood for the purpose of heat. Even though you're killing to burn this one soul because you're destroying avodah zarah and getting heat at the same time. The heat really is kind of like we said in the previous case. That the shade is not also, so the heat is not also either. Shade of avodah zarah is not also. Heat of avodah zarah is also. However, imla shein. If you do it in order to provide smoke, in other words, like fragrance and incense, that's a different ballgame. Also, because then, obviously, the burning is not a burning of eradication, and I know it's not subsequent, but rather it's instantaneous. Okay? So that's not an issue. What's the machlokas? Where's the machlokas Rabbeinu or Rabbanan about whether it's batel or not? B'stam, where there are no specific needs mentioned for this mixture. So that Rabbanan holds you have to throw a little fiyat. Rabbeinu holds you can just to toss one and keep the rest. Okay? Stop here for this evening.